Today we're looking at Adrienne Rich's third poem, Trying to Talk to a Man. For me, this is one of her best poems. It's extremely powerful, very personal, and extremely easy to understand once you go through it. It tells a deeply personal story of her relationship with her husband and the breakdown of that relationship. Now, if you look at the title, Trying to Talk with a Man, immediately you go to the word trying. Okay, so she's implying there you don't just talk to a man, you try to talk to a man, which kind of seems to imply that it's very difficult. Okay, the setting of the poem was written when Rich and her husband Alfred Conrad, now that's her husband's name, Alfred Conrad, travelled to New Mexico in the US, where the first atomic bombs were tested. Now, this is a dramatic setting because a bomb testing site in the American desert is very appropriate because it looks like, and we learn as we go through the poem, this is a relationship in serious trouble. So she's obviously connecting bombs exploding with her relationship ending. The first lines, now firstly I'll read the poem and then we'll discuss it. Out in the desert, we are testing bombs. That's why we came here. Sometimes I feel an underground river forcing its way between deformed cliffs, an acute angle of understanding, moving itself like a locus of the sun into this condemned scenery. What we've had to give up to get here. Whole LP collections, films we starred in, playing in the neighbourhoods, bakery windows full of dry, chocolate-filled Jewish cookies, the language of love letters, of suicide notes, afternoons on the riverbank, pretending to be children. Coming out to this desert, we meant to change the face of driving among dull green succulents, walking at noon in the ghost town, surrounded by a silence. That silence like the silence of the place, except that it came with us and is familiar. And everything we are saying until now was an effort to blot it out. Coming out here, we were up against it. Out here, I feel more helpless with you than without you. You mention the danger and list the equipment. We talk of people caring for each other in emergencies, laceration, thirst. But you look at me like an emergency. Your dry heat feels like power. Your eyes are stars of a different magnitude. They reflect lights that spell out exit. When you get up and pace the floor, talking of the danger, as if it were not ourselves, as if we were testing anything else. So obviously you can read it yourselves afterwards, but very powerful poem. If you look at the first two lines, even from the introduction, you see the space between the two lines. Basically, the separate lines are like their lives separate. Okay, so you're starting straight away into the poem and it's giving us a vision of what's going on there. The central theme is the collapse of the poet's marriage, obviously. Now, I have some extra notes on this because there's so much in this poem. I'll just read out the first few and then we'll look in detail at the really important ones. Okay, so firstly, the poem was written in free verse. The setting is a dramatic remote part of the desert in New Mexico in the US, where the first atomic bombs were tested. Now, Rich was just 16 when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These bombs caused terrible devastation and death. 129,000 people died, and these deaths were drawn out, painful. Now, Rich was deeply affected by these deaths, by what happened, the whole event, and it pushed her to be an objector of war for her whole life. The backdrop to this poem is very appropriate for a couple confronting the fact their relationship is in big trouble. Rich's marriage had broken up in 1970, and sadly 2 years later, Alfred committed suicide. The title of the poem, as I said earlier, can be interpreted to mean that trying to have a conversation with a man is like testing an atomic bomb. Now, that's a controversial statement, yes, but she doesn't mean just having a day-to-day normal conversation. She means having a conversation, the ultimate conversation, really, the one that could make or break a marriage. Like a bomb, this conversation is likely to be volatile, explosive, injurious, and even perhaps fatal. The parched desert can be seen as a metaphor for a relationship with little hope left. And that's very important, that metaphor. The parched desert. It's dry, it's longing for something. What is it? Like maybe Rich is longing for the marriage to be a success, to make things work. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. The dramatic desert lays their relationship bare, really, because the speaker realises that the silence of the desert is nothing new to the couple. In other words, the desert is very silent, they're silent, but it's not new. They brought that with them. It didn't just begin to happen. They're not in silence because they're in awe of what they're seeing or what they're learning. The silence has always been there. It's probably just more noticeable in the desert. She realises that the small talk they have, for example, in line 23, and everything we were saying until now was an effort to blot it out. Basically, all that small talk was just trying to stop the inevitable, the big discussion, the major discussion. The speaker begins to speak of the man in nuclear terminology. Your dry heat is power. So she's kind of taken out from looking at her husband and looking at him as something strange, something unique. The trip may have been one last attempt to fix things, but all the speaker finds is parallels to the place's history and her relationship. She and her husband have ventured into this place only for her to have an explosive moment of realization that the relationship is over. She knows what this means. It means there will be repercussions, and sadly, like the repercussions of a bomb, they will be devastating for both their lives. So it's such a powerful poem, and even the way the small things that you mightn't notice straight away. Firstly, like we're going to look here at this note, now I'm going to send you these so you don't need to worry about them at the moment. So basically, line 1, you have bombs. So a bomb is a word that has the power to strike terror into our heart, which it does. We think of these nuclear bombs, all these kind of things that could happen in the world and the damage they could cause. So we think of explosions, death, terrorists, wars. There is absolutely no positive connotation to the word bomb. And in the context of testing a relationship, this word suggests that it will explode and cause emotional devastation. So from line 1, we know this is going to be something big. This is going to be something not positive. Also in the poem, I want you to look at line 12. The language of love letters, of suicide notes. Now this is very important and very personal. It's kind of a shocking line, really, because Rich really leaves us into her life here. It surrounds Rich's entire relationship with Alfred, because when they met, like lots of people in those times, they wrote love letters to each other. But sadly, their relationship ended when Alfred committed suicide and left her a suicide note. So by putting these two phrases beside each other, Rich reminds us that both writings would contain the most intense kind of human emotions possible. And you can understand that, like obviously in the first throes of the relationship, when they were sending love letters, they were full of intense feelings of love for each other. They were at the best time in their relationship. They loved each other. They were very happy. So these letters would have been full of hope for the future and happiness. Sadly, the last letter he ever wrote her was his suicide note. And obviously, as you can imagine, that was the most devastating letter perhaps she would ever receive in her life. So that's quite an important line there, line 12 as well. Now also there's repetition in the poem, okay? Now the word silence, and it's in line 20. Surrounded by a silence that sounds like the silence of the place, except that it came from us and is familiar. Now silence is a powerful word. The first silence refers to the eerie silence of a ghost town, but the second silence refers to the deep silence between this couple, representing all of the things they cannot say to one another. The repetition of this word helps to establish the inability of this couple to communicate anymore. Okay, so you need to learn that quotation as well, line 20, and I'll write that in. There's one more. Okay, this power versus powerlessness. This is very important in Rich's poetry, and I'll be going into it more. But I want you to look at it in terms of this poem. Okay, so where is the power in this poem? And I suppose the obvious thing is it's the power of the bomb, the damage they can do. It may be a bomb that ends a life, or it can also be a bomb dropped into a relationship that kills it. Okay, so something very, very powerful. And then also powerlessness. An important lesson for everyone in everyone's life, regardless of when it was written in the 50s, the 70s, today. The important lesson is that we cannot control another person in our relationship. And the speaker that is Rich in this poem is powerless. She cannot save the relationship, regardless of how she might feel, regardless of what's going on that, may end it anyway. There's nothing she can do. The silence is deafening, really, and I mean that in both ways. The silence between the couple, and the silence in their lives. What more is there to say? It's finished, it's over, the relationship is gone. So there's some important bits there on the poem. Obviously, as always, I'm going to be giving you a lot more notes on it, and I will be sending you a screenshot of this. I'm just trying to think, is there anything else there now? I have the extra note on the bombs. Oh, that line there, I think it's excellent. Your dry heat feels like power. Your eyes are stars of a different magnitude, and that's a metaphor. But the imagery here, they reflect lights that spell out exit. Like she's looking into his eyes. The reflection of the exit sign is in them. But the irony is, he wants to exit their relationship. Okay, so the imagery there is just amazing as well. It's a great poem, guys. It's very easy to understand. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. I'll send you loads more notes. This is just the first of one of Rich's such personal poems. You can't help just really enjoying them and understanding them. And they make it very easy to be able to write about her as well. So I'm hoping that, I know it's more difficult to do this online, but this poet is just so good. It might actually be one of your favourites at the end. Okay?